Hello and welcome to Meet the Manager. It's our regular catch up with the best advice from some of the community's top FPL managers of all time. Yes, we will focus on those with a great rank history, but we're adding to that by including managers with an interesting story to tell about how FPL is impacting on their lives. Also, we'll focus on managers who are offering a unique insight and research into the game to propel them and hopefully us up the rankings. Today I'm joined by Prasan Singhal, known as Pras to the community. He has 3 top 10k finishes and he has not finished outside the top 100k since 2011, so a decade ago. What we'll do is find out a bit more about his career history, his tips for success, and then we'll take a look at his next week's planning, which is particularly important for him and hopefully yourselves as well, because he's wildcarding. So it'd be good to find out what wildcarders are doing, and if you're wildcarding as well, you can get some tips as well. So to timestamp this, we are preparing for game week 8 of the 2021-22 season. Praz, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here. You've talked about my 10-year history. It's a 10-year of knowing Fantasy Football Scout. I've been there, read the articles, Scoutcast, so it's a real bucket list moment to be on, so thank you for having me.
No, it's great. Now, I know your name, not your face, because it's the first time we've met, albeit virtually, but I've seen your name, as you said, for about a decade. It's one of those names on Fantasy Football Scout, in the forum there, and, now increasingly on Twitter and we're in other places chatting about FPL. But yeah, I've seen your name there, and I don't know, maybe we've chatted over Leighton Baines or whatever in the past before. What we'll do is we'll put your career history up so people can see it. And this shows that, as I said, 3 top 10k finishes. That was 2018-19. You were top 5k actually that season, 4,000 or so. 2014-15, 8,000. 2012-13, 6,000 rank. And you've got to go way back into 2011-12 where you got 136k when you finished outside the top 100k. So and loads of those other ranks are all like 11k last season. So these are, not too shabby on the ranks there. So we'll find out a bit about, I don't know, just before we talk about some of the things like hits and captaincy and stats and attitudes to risk and things like that. I'm quite interested, how would you describe yourself as fantasy, as a dullard, a maverick? Which sort of manager are you?
I think I'm a bit of both, and generally, I think the stereotypes of being a dullard or maverick are a little bit overstretched in the sense that I think you can be a dullard in different phases of the season. It depends on how your team looks. And if I have to characterize myself, I think I'm patient. I stick to the process. Having done this for over 10 years, I don't panic if it's a 400k rank by Christmas. I know how the second half works with the double game weeks, with the chips.
Yeah.
Usually sensible with how those are played. Fixtures are very important. That's probably the number one thing I look for, both in terms of the wild card, but my transfers in. Generally not a 2-week punt versus Norwich kind of guy, but what is the next 6 weeks looking like? And will I be able to hold the guy if he blanks for the next 2 weeks? So that's generally the approach.
Okay. Both of us are in a sort of similar position at the moment. Although you're wildcarding this week, but in that we started off well, and it's sort of been a bit of a slide since. Hopefully I'll be in a better position, and you certainly will be with your wild card. But it's interesting what you're saying about the rankings as well. So some people are looking at ranks that we've got, like 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, a million, and thinking what a terrible start, because we're seeing all these early ranks and Twitter and Fantasy Football Scout Forum, people in getting in the top 10k already. But as you said, it doesn't really matter, because we know that there are other adventures to come this season, hopefully. First of all, hits. Do you take many hits? Because a lot of people do. Are you okay with hits?
I do. I'm quite okay with hits. So I'm not off the camp, don't take hits and you'll have a good season, because I think that's where we have our edge. I tend to take more hits in the first half of the season, or even the first 10, 12 weeks, because that's when we get the most information. That's when, you actually find out if Sar is the right guy or whether it's Mbuemo. So it's okay for me to be more aggressive in that part. Price
Okay.
rises are also a point. It's more volatile. But as the season progresses, you have more underlying data. You have
Yeah.
a grip on the fixtures. I tend not to take as many. So last year was an example. I took in total about 18 hits, which is
That's quite high.
quite a lot. But 12 of those were in the first 19 game weeks. Now, of course, last season was unlike anything else we've seen in the last 10 years. But it was typical of something that I would do. Almost 60 to 70% of my hits would come in the first half of the season.
Okay, now that is interesting because I think, in a way, we have to sort of catch up with price changes as well. And as you said, it does start to become clearer. So, for example, you mentioned Mbobo and Tony as well. It comes into the equation there. They look the real deal in terms of cheap Premier League assets. They're emerging, and then other players perhaps aren't. So Greenwood, for example, player I've got, I don't really need him because Manchester United. You're a Manchester United fan. You can tell by the big flag.
Yes.
Players like that. Is it time for people to hop off players like that? Manchester United assets. Do you think?
I mean, it's if the evidence is there, then whether that's a hit or not, I think you need to plan to get off them because it ticks basically the box of fixtures. It ticks the box or fixtures turning for the worse. It ticks the box of something happening with the team that has fundamentally changed what we've seen in the past, which for Greenwood is definitely the case. And defensively, I mean, if we're talking about Shaw, look, the attacking threat is there, but ultimately you like, managers like yourself like the clean sheet as the base.
Yeah.
Everything else comes on top. And if the clean sheets aren't there, and then that doesn't help. I do have a warning on Shaw, though. I mean, Manchester United last year, a lot of their clean sheets came in the tougher fixtures. So it wouldn't be surprising, just as people are jumping off Shaw, that the clean sheets come back. But I think there's more value in Chelsea and City at the moment for the same price.
No, that's a good point. What overall your attitudes to risk as well? So you don't mind taking hits, and that can be risky. I tend to take hits when a player is injured or is definitely on the slide. But that level of hits, you would imagine you're taking some risks there. How are you taking a risk? Taking out Ronaldo for Lukaku one week, that type of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. So if for example, last week, I'm the type of manager who would have kept Ronaldo, not gone for Lukaku. Obviously, it sounds smart now, given that Lukaku didn't score his offside goal and the other one that was the miss. But I tend to take hits. What I do is I calibrate myself to wildcard teams at that point in time. So if I'm looking, when I was in game week 5, I saw most people had Jota, DCL. My front line looked very similar. DCL and Antonio, Ronaldo. You have your Salah, Rafinha. So as long as I'm calibrated and close to the wildcard team, I'd be risk averse.
Okay.
If I feel like I'm veering away from where the right, I don't want to use the word template, but the right team, which fits for that fixture run, then I'll be more open to taking hits to basically catch up. Because if I feel, for example, if a Jota was firing, a Greenwood to Jota, I wouldn't think about it. It would be a hit I would take in an instance because something has changed, and I would make up those 4 points over. And double game weeks are different as well, where you can make up those points in an instant. So this is why I do it beyond just an injury, and I'm open to taking hits as needed.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and a lesson perhaps I should learn, because it enables you not to fall too far behind the curve. I think we've got so much increasing knowledge about the game at the moment. Live FPL is a great tool, Ragabolly's website there, but it's almost too much information. It's too painful in a way when you see the effective ownership. So, for example, those are the one without, say, Rafinha, or without other players like that. If they score and you don't own them, that can cost you 100k in the rankings, just like that, more even. And other players. So, for example, I have Antonio and Salah. Most people do. If you don't captain them, you actually want them to fail. How do you walk that tightrope of making sure you've got the template, but at the same time making sure that you're different enough from the template to go up the rankings?
It's a tough one. I think we're all dealing with EO, which has come into our lives in the last 3 years. It's a great tool, but I sort of balance what I think is right versus what is EO. So let's talk about captaincy. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
I would never look at EO as the only or as the first thing. But I'm not going to lie and say I don't care about EO at all. I mean, if I feel next week Salah is going to be 200% captained, I'm not going to take a punt on Lukaku. I'm happily going with Salah because I think he's also a
yeah,
good option. Now, this is completely different from last year, for example, where game week 38, I was 18K and I wanted to push into the 10K. Then I use it as a tool and I captained Mane instead, which got me close to a 10K. I ended up in 11K. But so you can use it to your advantage and know how can I take the risk. And essentially, EO is telling you what is the level of risk you're taking of being wrong. If you're wrong with a Salah cap at 200%, not much damage. If you're wrong with a Mane cap and Salah hauls, then you're taking basically double the risk.
yeah, definitely. What are sort of other tips and strategies do you have that would enable? I mean, looking at your ranking history, that would enable people to secure a top 100K and push on into the top 10K.
I think I talked about fixture planning. I talked about being patient. I talked about being the hits. I think one other thing is something very important is FPL content consumption, which I think is increasingly important. There's a lot of really good content creators like yourselves, Fantasy Football Scout, and others. I think finding the right content for you, not getting overindulged, not getting overwhelmed by the amount of information that is there. I think that's important. I have a few trusted sources, Fantasy Football Scout articles, for example, a few Twitter people I follow whose advice, opinion I value. And that helps me a lot. And podcasts as well. There's about 8 that I have subscribed to, but there's 2 or 3 that I regularly listen to, which is because I know the way the managers think. There's one thing is content creator bias can sometimes take you. You don't know if that they can all make good decisions, but they're all thinking about their team at the end of the day as well. So if somebody is making the move from a Lukaku to Ronaldo, it's probably because they don't have any other fires to put out. So it doesn't mean that's the only move. You need to have that balance in mind.
I mean, I get that a lot as a content creator. Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do that? Well, because I don't want to take that level of hits that week. And my team is quite specific and he might do that. And now you're appearing on this, you're going to get that as well.
Right.
We'll when we show your wild card and then you make the inevitable changes based on team developments and news.
Absolutely.
People will say, why did you change? But yes, that's the cross we have to bear.
Right.
In terms of Twitter, who is it particularly on Twitter you follow? Might be some tips for people there to follow, and why.
Well, these are people who think differently to myself. So the boys on the wire, Late Riser, Zofar, Big Man Bucker. I mean, these guys I think have a really good mix of Late Riser being the maverick, Zofar being the steady head, the planner, Big Man with the stats. So I think that's a great mix. I follow them. There was obviously Mark with Black Box and Az. They have the right mix of analysis with opinion, and that helps a lot. A lot of thought goes into it. I mean, as I mentioned, Scoutcast has been there for years. So the content that the Scout produces. I follow Tom from WGTA, love their pods as well. It's something I've always. So it's a mix of the pod and things that are created on Twitter. There's a few thread makers, FPL Swede. There is Architect, Mihir, Hibo. These guys do threads that I really enjoy. And I know the level of information, the deep dive they've done is very different from somebody else who's put 10 tweets together and provided something that may be less tailored to what I need.
Yeah, they can be quite concise. It's interesting what you say about offering something different for yourself. Something I've, in a way, struggled with in the last few years in this proliferation of content. Just some of the ones you mentioned there. I do follow a lot of those and more as well. And it's hard to pinpoint what point you stop wanting to follow an echo chamber of people who follow your views and people who are wildly different. And once again, it's like a tightrope, and it's finding that balance of, I don't want too many different voices because I'll just get confused. I don't know which way I'm going. But I don't want everyone to agree with me because then I'll never improve. So how is that what you try and do with your content that you've got? Is that mix?
Yes, I do. And even when I am myself putting stuff out, whether that's a thread or a tweet, I'm open to people disagreeing simply because, there is no right answer in what we're playing. And we can agree to disagree. I agree to disagree a lot. And that's fine because, everybody is basically calibrating the level of risk they want to take for each position. For Salah, I want no risk, as an example. And for and we'll see that in my wildcard, for a position like a 7.5 mid, I'm happy to take a risk. Is Jota the right person or is Foden the right person? I don't know. But I'm happy to calibrate the risk based on that. So I'm happy to engage with managers who think differently. I mean, Luke Disable on Twitter. I mean, he's a perfect guy who will disagree with everything, challenge everything. And these are managers that are fantastic to follow because while you may disagree with them disagreeing with you, that's fine because at least now there's another perspective that you may have missed that he's pointed out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Luke is he's either going to win it or come outside the top 2 million. There's no middle ground because he will take those brave decisions and he will look at things that perhaps other people may not see until it's a bit too late. So it gets there quite early. How do you think what would you change in your game to become a top 100 manager? That very elite band, if you've reached that dizzy height, how would you move up to that level?
I was thinking about this when we had the notes, and I don't have an answer, Joe. To be honest, the way I play, I'm not set out to be a top 100 manager because the way, I started, I was 50K in game week 3. I wanted to take risk. I wanted to go for it, right? So I took a -8. I got Jota in because I know Firmino is injured. I got rid of Tsimikas. So I took a -8 and I said, I'm going to go for it because I have these points banked in the first 3 weeks. And it fell flat. Basically, I could have gone for Sarr, been boring, and just, done the simple transfers. I struggle when I'm basically outside my comfort zone. And my comfort zone is to stick to what I think is sensible, what's right. Now, I'm not saying what managers like Luke and Leitriser do is not sensible, but they're willing to take the risk. They're willing to be wrong, which basically means their years they may end up outside the 100 to 100K. But then there are years where they will enter the 100K brackets, which I can only dream of. I don't know how I'll react if I'll be in the top 5. Both my ranks close to 5K have been where I've made a late push. I've had a great double game week bench boost. I've entered, 6K last game week coming into the season. I've never been in the 5K, let's say 10 weeks into something like what Andy had last year.
Yeah.
I've never been in that position. I think I'll just continue to remain boring and be too scared of kind of making the end push. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's something I need to learn. And maybe until I'm in it, I can't say how I'll react.
Well, I think you probably do okay in that. I mean, I've been in that position where I've been within that high ranking quite early on. And it's relatively easy to stay there once you're that high up because you will have that template. And then you've just got to keep on the template,
right?
And that is the way to stay in there. To push on to the top 100, I think you do need to be a Leitriser or a Luke,
right?
But so I think it's just fair. I mean, people say it's luck and variance, but your 4,000 season, for example, luck and variance prevented that being a top 1,000. That's still quite close. That's still quite close. Same with your 11,000 last. That's a top 10K, isn't it? That was the fourth top 10K. That's a bonus point or two. That's an assist.
Correct.
That level of variance is there, but it's that consistency, which is why you're here.
Correct.
Let's have a look at your wildcard team. So this is as it stands. I know you sent me some notes of sort of who's nailed, who's not, and who could be changed. So, Do you want to just sort of run through it? I don't know how you want to do it. It's up to you, really. You can either run through it from goalkeepers to the front, or you can run through it by absolutely nailed in, and these ones are up for grabs.
What I'll do is, okay, for anyone who's listening, let me just run through the team. I'll talk about the big picture on why I've gone with certain price points. I know you love price points, Joe.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to talk about that. And then, of course, discuss who I think is nailed and where things can change. So, for the listeners, it's Ramsdale in goal, Foster as the second keeper, Dias, Rudiger, Cancelo, TAA, Livramento as the back five. You have Mbeumo, Rafinha, Salah, Jota, and Brownhill. And then in attack, I have Lukaku, Antonio, and Tony. And big picture, we've had 7 weeks of information now, and I think there are certain things that I feel we know. I feel we know that we need 2 premiums. One is Salah and one attacker, because we want to rotate between Lukaku and Ronaldo across at least the next 10 to 15 weeks. What we know is we need at least one forward that's around 8 million, because you have Antonio, you have DCL, Bamford, Watkins, Ings, so many good players, and Jimenez around that price point that you just don't want to have maybe 2 premiums and nothing else in the middle. We know in defense, or I know in defense, I want TAA and at least 2 defenders that are in the 5.5 to 6 million bracket. And those can be Chelsea, City, it can be both. I'm not sure yet whether it's 2 City, 1 Chelsea, or whether it's 2 Chelsea, 1 City. I know that I want a mid-priced mid, which is basically my punt position, which is, I talked about it earlier. It's a 7.5 to 8 million mid, and it'll be Jota for now. And the reason I have Jota in there now is because Liverpool have the first fixture against Watford. And the hope is if Jota is starting that game, I want him in that game.
Yeah, definitely.
If Jota is not starting in that game, that's Foden's spot or that's Mount's spot. So that's basically a spot that it's not one I'm going to have for the next 8 weeks. It's definitely one I want for the next 2 or 3 weeks and basically chase that upside in that one position. I know Tom Freeman talked about this in one of his videos as well.
That's music to my ears, that, because that's why I'm keen at the moment. I have Jota and Greenwood, but I'm keeping one of them, or I'm keeping that position, because I might want Grealish, I might want Mount, I might want Foden, and what I've seen a lot of teams with Salah, lots of 5 to 6 million midfielders, and they've got to find another 1.5 million or 2 million to get up to some of those other players that you mentioned. And as you said, Jota against Watford, if he's starting, even if he comes on for the last 20 minutes, I'm quite keen for that. So I like that. And it's interesting what you say about Tom as well. Tom Freeman, he has the thing with it's sort of a 4th midfielder, but it doesn't necessarily mean the cheapest midfield, the second cheapest midfielder. It's just a position that you can move around. I remember speaking to him ages ago, and he had someone like Walcott in there as well when no one had Walcott, because he thought, well, if I'm wrong, I can just move to another, because that was when Walcott was a bit more. So that's good. So Salah's locked in. He's
correct. Salah's locked in. So in my current draft, what I have locked is Salah, Lukaku, Cancelo, because I think we've seen enough from Cancelo that even if he misses the odd game, that's okay. He'll be in. Livramento, only because he's the gem, so I'm not wildcarding for like your famous Fraser wildcard, not for Livramento, but he's a key part of it. Rafinha, Mbeumo, and Ramsdale. Ramsdale, I say nailed only because it's a new shinier toy than Sanchez. There's nothing wrong with going Sanchez, I think, but I think what I do know is I want a 4.5 keeper, and we've got an opportunity here with Ramsdale, and I'm going to take it. In terms of where it's open, right now, I want 2 of Rudiger, Dias, James, and Chilwell. And James and Chilwell are the most exciting punts, but at the moment, given how I think, it's too risky. And especially if you have Cancelo as well, Foden as well, it's basically 4 or 5 positions where you'll be panicking every week whether the person starts or not.
A lot of people over the last couple of weeks had got James and Alonso in, only for it not to work out. And I suspect there'll be a lot of people getting Chilwell in, but we just don't know at the moment. But Rudiger, I think we do know, don't we?
This is why the draft I have up at the moment has Rudiger and Dias, because we know these 2 guys are glue guys. They're not going anywhere. And what that does is I mean, if James starts again and he's basically firing, and we know that he's a starter, I wouldn't mind going Diaz to James in due course. That's absolutely okay. But at least you start off with knowing what you know, and we know that Diaz and Rudiger are nailed. In terms of upside, so I mentioned, so there's three positions here in my wild card, which is Jota, Antonio, and Tony. And Antonio is a strange one, and I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But these are the three positions where I feel I can differentiate myself, because most people have Salah, Rafinha, Lukaku. The others I've talked about. Everyone's moving to double City or double Chelsea defense. These are three positions where I feel, people will hold on to Antonio. Anyone who's not on wildcard will just hold on to him. He's done well, to be fair. There's no reason to move beyond him. But there's a slight fixture turn with the Europa League. It's something I'm considering. I'm not there yet, but there is value in other forwards. Maybe if I wanted to go up to Jesus, if I wanted to come down to Watkins, who's looked really good since Villa have moved to a 5-3-2. There is Bamford, if he comes back. I mean, he's already hurt me in the past, where I got him up for DCL and only for him to get injured.
Same here.
So that's, this is where I feel I can go different. If I have enough information, I'd be okay to moving off Antonio if it came to it. Tony, at the moment, I think he's a great enabler. They've shown Brentford that they are an attacking side. They can play it amongst the big boys in the first 7 game weeks. I do think that Mbeumo and Tony may be a little bit of a overkill, but I'm not going to be playing both of them every week, given, as you've seen, it's a 4 at the back. One of Mbeumo or Tony will be benched, and I think it'll be mostly Mbeumo most weeks. And Livramento has great fixtures as well. So it's not that I need that position. So I'm okay with looking at an Armstrong, even a Hwang from Wolves, who's had good returns over the last 2. But at the moment, I think the safe pick is Tony, and that's the third spot that I want as my forward.
Okay, I mean, looking at, Livramento is a gift at the moment. I've not played him, but accidentally have played him by the virtue of having Christensen.
Right.
And Livramento's always got me points. So it's definitely worth having. He's an absolutely brilliant first sub, especially if you've got 4, if you're playing 4 at the back.
He's the only one stopping, I think, most people from going 5 at the back. Not that I think 5 at the back is the right strategy, but you could easily go Trent, double City, double Chelsea.
Yeah.
But you just can't give up on a gem like Livramento that you have with the fixtures that he's got coming up.
So I saw Alexander-Arnold coming out of a lot of teams over the last when he was injured last week. I'm hoping a lot of them were in your position, in that they're wildcarding to get him back in. Having taken Alexander-Arnold out in the past, I know how hard it is to get him back in unless you have a wildcard. Because there's a real reluctance to go up to that next level in defence. There's never quite enough time. There's always other things to do. Is Alexander-Arnold definitely a lock? Because it doesn't matter if he's injured for another week or 2. You'll want him.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm happy to bench him if he's not available for Watford. Unless, of course, Klopp says, he's still a couple of weeks away. Yeah. It's something, then we go into an abyss of unknown on when he's back. Then I can avoid. But I think, look, there's enough problems that we have over the season, which is people getting injured or people just not performing to the level that you're expecting. You need to have 5 or 6 guys that you will say, I will hold no matter what. Price drop, no matter what. Double clean sheet loss, no matter what. And that's my attitude with Salah, TAA, and hoping that I'll have that with the 3 other premium defenders as well.
And Brownhill is your guy to put in. Just
played every minute. He's now 4.4. I have this thing of now I can get him for 0.1 cheaper than anyone else who's not wildcarding. So that's where I'll go with.
Yeah, I did the same with Dale Stevens last year. Something about Burnley midfielders. They get sold a lot, but yeah, they can be cheap for wildcarders. Let's have a look at some fixtures. So what I've got here is I've got the next 8 fixtures and sorted on the Fantasy Football Scout season ticker by order of ease and difficulty. It's got Leeds absolutely top over the long term. So your Rafinha, he can stay. Obviously, don't worry about him. Chelsea, this is why you've got lots of Chelsea. Then Southampton, Like Livramento's good. I've got Armstrong in my team. Could easily become Tony. He's a potential alternative for that price point.
Correct.
Tottenham are interesting. Now I'm going to stop here with Tottenham and Chelsea. So there's a couple of things here. Chelsea is Lukaku or indeed Ronaldo. Are they necessary? Do you need to have Lukaku?
Look, I think it comes back to your style of management. I wouldn't hate if somebody came up with a draft having Son instead of Lukaku and being different. Yeah. I just think Lukaku will come back to what he showed early signs of because Mount is back. I mean, even Thomas Tuchel said in the press conference, Mount has a good understanding with him, which is why I'm also considering Mount for the Jota spot. So it wouldn't be instead of, it'll be alongside Lukaku. I just think I need to have that structure because game week 12, latest game week 14, I'll want Ronaldo for sure. Yeah. And I'm not going to be finding funds if I distribute them across my squad. I'll need a wild card to get Ronaldo back. I'd rather have that spot, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, these fixtures for Chelsea are absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
If he's not going to fire, I'm happy to be wrong. There's a lot of value there. I can downgrade him to a Bamford, to a Watkins, and then make the Son move then. I wouldn't do it now. It's just not my management style that I get the Iheanacho or Bamford now and put that money in Son because there's more question marks on Son, frankly. Just because he got 2 assists, or actually one was chalked off, doesn't change my thinking in the sense of where Spurs are going as a team, where Nuno is going as a manager. I'd rather go with Chelsea that are on the up.
I agree, because looking at those fixtures here, Tottenham have Newcastle next. So wildcarders like you would be tempted, wow, Son against Newcastle, I'll have that. Chelsea against Brentford, well, but then Chelsea have Norwich at home, where Lukaku is definitely in the conversation for the captaincy. Then Newcastle himself, and then Burnley. So these are 3 great fixtures before they turn with Leicester and Manchester United. And as you said about Manchester United and Shaw, there could be clean sheets for Manchester United there. But then looking at Tottenham's fixtures, after Newcastle, they've actually got West Ham, Manchester United and Everton. So these aren't great fixtures, you would imagine, for lots of goals. Before game week 12, they really hot up with Leeds, Burnley, Brentford maybe, and then Norwich. So from what you're saying there, for those that are going Lukaku here, and it doesn't work out for some reason, he's just a Giroud. He's just a new Giroud. He's just up there. Hey, do you mind just getting in the way while we all score around you? And if he is that guy, well then game week 12, hop off and rearrange and get Kane in, get Son in, because they are about to go on a big old run of good games. And also we'll know there what sort of shape Kane's in. And I mentioned Kane though, so you mentioned Son, but Kane, Vardy, Jesus is in your thoughts. Have you got your mind open to these players yet? Too unfashionable?
For sure.
Okay.
I think Kane less so. I mean, Kane is my captain in my zombie team. Of course, I thought he'd go to City. But I think because I don't want to lose Salah, 3 premium structure just doesn't work. I mean, people have tried it. Some weeks it'll work, but a lot of weeks, you have a couple of disappointments and the whole team suffers. I think so. Kane for me, unless something fundamentally changes, like you said, by game week 12, he's out. Jesus is very much even in consideration for this draft instead of Antonio, if I see more. But with the Brazil stuff, I mean, we just don't know yet. I mean, even Rafinha, we don't know. They're playing, I think, on a Friday before the weekend starts on Saturday. I don't know how many of these players will actually start. But I'm interested. A City attacker is always interesting, and it's one of the reasons why I'm debating going only one City defender, because I may want Foden and Jesus, or dare I say Torres in the future if he comes back.
Well, I mean, Torres could come back in Burnley. It's a tough fixture congestion, and realistically, to load up on City, it's game week 8 next, and those of us that have been playing a long time, game week 8 is a special week. Because it's a special week where investment in Man City can pay off. It's the week often after an international break. In the past, Aguero hat-trick 4 goals was against Newcastle. I've had ridiculous luck with fixture swings getting on the likes of Jesus, etc. then. And I think there's a fixture swing, it's Burnley. And then Brighton, that's a tricky one for their attackers. But then Crystal Palace. So there's 2 out of 3 great fixtures there coming up for their attackers. So this could be what you were saying. More Maverick wildcarders might be thinking, who's going to be the next Aguero for me?
It's the thing with City. I mean, we don't know who plays up front. I mean, they tried Torres. They have gone with Foden. I think Grealish played against in the last game. Sterling has played there. We just don't know. Foden has shown signs of taking up the silver role, which he's doing very well. So he's the one that's interesting now. Grealish has had a lot of minutes, but not a lot of output. So Jesus is the one that interests me because it looks like he's had a word with Pep. He wants to play on the wing, and he's doing really well on the right side.
And just some of those other teams with fixtures, they're sort of mid-table for fixtures. The likes of Wolves still trucking along. Only really got a couple of tough games, so those of us with a Wolves defender, but not a lot. I'm not seeing any Wolves on wildcards. Maybe Jimenez. Is Jimenez in your thoughts?
I think it's a little bit of not, I don't know which bias this is, but he's basically not done a lot but hurt me in the last 2 weeks, and I haven't had him. And I feel like I now need to make up the points by not going Jimenez but somebody else. Maybe I'm wrong. Probably I'm wrong. But, I think he's averaging about 0.3 XG, XA per game, which is okay. But I think he's somebody I can go against and try to punt on somebody else with better fixtures over the next 5 or 6. So he's not particularly in my thoughts.
And just some of those other teams worth mentioning. Leicester, now you mentioned Iheanacho there. After Manchester United, they've got Brentford, Arsenal and Leeds. So a mixed bag there. They've got Chelsea, Watford, Southampton and Villa over the next 8. So a real mixed bag there. But there's some of those fixtures sound quite good if Iheanacho's going to start. You sort of waiting to see if he's going to be a regular starter?
Very, very interested in Iheanacho. I mean, they've struggled, obviously, defensively. But from an attacking point of view, I mean, listening to some of the Leicester fans, they are now speaking of Iheanacho starting.
Okay.
And if he does like he did in the last game and continues to do well, I mean, he was a gem last year in the second half. He'd be great value at 7 million.
Now, it's interesting what you're saying, because hopefully what we can do in Meet the Manager, as well as the Scoutcast and other things, is sort of future gaze a bit, looking at the template of the future. And you have already mentioned Antonio possibly being moved to perhaps someone like Iheanacho or Jesus, and here we can see where no one's thinking that at the moment, but they could be soon, because when you look at West Ham's fixtures, they are tricky. Everton, Tottenham, Villa, Liverpool in game week 11. Then they've got Wolves. Wolves' defence is pretty good, actually. Then they've got City, another great defence. Brighton, another great defence. Then Chelsea, another great defence. So these aren't great fixtures at all for Antonio. But then you move up and we look back at Leicester. Game week 13, Watford. Game week 14, Southampton. So these are quite nice couple of fixtures there. Looking at City as well. They've got Watford, they've got Villa, they've got Everton around that time. It's sort of not yet. You said you're not there yet, but you can almost see the future with this patchwork quilt of fixtures.
That's exactly it, which is why I talked about the price points. I want that 8 million spot, which I can move around as required. I'm not going to pretend that losing Antonio is going to be easy, and he can definitely hurt. I mean, he puts on premium numbers when he starts. The question is, if Moyes is going to continue to play him in Europa League games like he did last midweek, there is going to be a point where he's either going to tire, be rested, or I don't want to wish injury on anybody, but he is always just, very close to tweaking his muscle somewhere.
Something's going to go. Something's going to ping.
Exactly.
Manchester United. Just before we're gonna look at some big chances stats in a sec. But looking at Manchester United, this is why people are moving off them on their wild card, like yourself, and why I will be after Leicester, which I actually quite like the Leicester game for Manchester United. I think that could be potentially high scoring, and Ronaldo's had his rest, hopefully. So they after Leicester, they've got Liverpool, Tottenham, City, Watford, good fixture, then Chelsea, Arsenal, and then Crystal Palace. Gets better game week 15 or so for Manchester United. So that's when we might be going back to them. And Watford, so Sarr owners, this is why we're not seeing Sarr on any wildcards. They got Liverpool, Everton, Southampton, Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea, Leicester and City. So it's the Manchester United, Chelsea. As soon as you start seeing Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, City all in a clump of fixtures, it's like alarm bells go.
I mean, with Ranieri, things may change, which is again one to watch. Maybe he goes, his positional. Always with a new manager, you want to see what happens, which is why I was originally thinking of having Bachmann as my second keeper, but I just don't know now. Will he be actually first choice, or will it be Foster now? So
No.
it's one to watch how Ranieri does at Watford.
You can afford to gamble on Foster being a non-playing goalkeeper, but Bachmann as well. Then suddenly you're just relying on Watford. So let's have a look at some stats here. So I'll go through them in a sec. But this is the last four, and these are big chances. These are total big chances here. But just before I go through some of those players and get your thoughts on them, stats wise, what stats do you like? How do you use stats? How do you convert those numbers into actual FPL points?
I think like most of us, we've grown up watching the games, looking at touches in penalty area box, like I'm talking 2012, 2013, and basically making a judgment that my eye test is correct. And I think it makes sense. This guy's attacking. It's obviously moved now. There's a lot of information available. Ultimately, I look at stats when I want to validate my thoughts on a player. If I get very deep into the stats, I can confuse myself. Maybe if let's look at Lingard or Iñárritu last year. They didn't have the stats, but they continued to perform. If you watch the games, you think they're doing well. If you watch the stats, you think they're not. So my approach is generally to mix the two things, watch a lot of football, and most of the times I enter the Fantasy Football Scout comparison table is when I'm debating exactly which 8 million guy do I want. If I want to replace Antonio with, is Watkins doing the business in the last 3 weeks, or should it be Bamford? That's when I get into it. Yeah. If I have, if I'm not sure about a player, Hwang, for example, I don't know him. He's not been there enough. I want to see, is he really getting into the box? I don't know how Wolves are structured. That kind of stuff I use stats a lot for. Heat maps, XG, of course, XGI for defenses, XGC for defenses. So it's a balance. There is no one go-to stat. In fact, there could be weeks where I wouldn't look at any stats because I feel like I've got enough information. I know my transfer. I'm not going to, you have to balance out your job and other things with that. But I use stats as much as needs to, and the Scout is great for that.
Okay, so I'll just run through this list of players. So some of these are in your wild card, some aren't, and some are considered. So this is big chances total. So it's pure, gone analog, no XG here, just analog, big chances. Salah, top 7, world of his own up there. 8 shots on target, 13 in the box, huge. Then Ronaldo. So he's played less. So this isn't by minutes. He's second, despite playing much less games. 5 big chances, 14 inside the box, 7 on target. Mane, who, because of structure, people aren't looking at, but he's up there, 12 shots inside the box, 5 big chances. Sarr, we can see there, but the fixtures aren't in his favour coming up, but perhaps one to monitor. Vardy is there, no one's getting Vardy. 4 big chances. Mbomo, Brentford, 4 big chances. Jimenez, 4 big chances. Watkins, 3. Remember, this is last 4 game weeks, so our mindset from weeks 1 and 2 needs to be altered a bit and look more towards the likes of Watkins. Jota's still there. Been unlucky, us owners say.
So.
No Lukaku. It's Werner is up there. Werner is the top for big chances last 4 weeks amongst Chelsea assets. And then Son. Why people want him there, is he has that assist potential as well as goal scoring. Will I ask you that weird question? Considering Werner over Lukaku at all?
Look, I'm not going to say I'm not open to it. I'm not going to go with Werner, but look, I think with Lukaku, with James coming back, Mount coming back, I have confidence that this will come back, and this is one area. Absolutely the area where I would trust my instinct over what the stats are telling me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I look at the fixtures, not necessarily this coming game week, but I look at the next game week. Chelsea against Norwich at home. I think it's at home anyway, but Chelsea against Norwich anywhere. Doesn't matter where they play my back garden and they'd still win. Chelsea against Norwich, that just screams Lukaku captaincy. But Salah captain. Now, if I'd have captained Salah every week, as other people in my mini leagues may have done, I'd be doing much better. Do you think we should just do that? I mean, less is more.
It's always the question of over management, right? I mean, we always think we can outsmart, the passive manager.
Yeah.
Probably, but I'll continue to try to beat it. I think targeting teams like Norwich, avoiding teams like City is the right play. And if Salah turns out to beat in a particular week, that won't change how I see it next week. To your point on Norwich, we're not talking about the great Neil Maupay, who plays in Norwich next week and can be a nice little position holder for Tony, who can come in after.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are options there. Yeah, I like your wildcard. This isn't a sort of video where we're judging wildcards here, but I'll just tell you anyway. I like it.
Right.
Part of the reason I like it is because even though my team is in the doldrums, many of those players that you've got, I've also got, or I can easily get to. So that makes me feel a little bit better, and hopefully it makes others feel a bit better who are perhaps in the doldrums with their rankings.
This is the thing I mentioned. I don't want to be different on the wildcard just for the sake of it, because I think that ends up to be. I want to plan the team. Now, if everybody has Rafinha and I didn't, that's fine. I'm happy to have Rafinha. On the other hand, on Antonio, I'm happy to be different, maybe. So, I'm not going to force it and just get a different team just because I'm on wildcard and I can play with the buttons and have unlimited transfers. And that's basically the approach I want to take.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks so much for your time, Praz. It's been a great chat, and it's been really good to see your wildcards and find out a bit about the manager behind that career history, which is a great career history of consistency and some really great high finishes there. But in the meantime, thanks so much for joining me, and good luck with the game week. Good luck with the rest of the season.
Thank you for having me, Joe. It's been a real pleasure. Good luck to you as well.